Good afternoon, I'm Brian Leroney, Director of Corporate Affairs at Scottish Water, and welcome to the launch of our Sustainable Future Together, Scottish Water's strategic plan for the next 25 years. Welcome to Scottish Water colleagues who are here today. Welcome to our sector stakeholders who have been able to join us, and to everyone who's watching this online. We are coming to you live from our office in Steps, just outside of Glasgow, in what is very much a first for Scottish Water. We're broadcasting this live on YouTube so that people can attend, as it were, our event without having to travel here. So it's one small step towards reducing our environmental impact. Also joining me here today is our Chief Executive, Douglas Milliken, Simon Parsons, our Director of Strategic Customer Service Planning, and Peter Peacock, Chair of the Customer Forum. Over the course of the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to set out Scottish Water's strategy for the future, the key challenges that we face, and our exciting ambitions for those. So to lead us into that, without any further ado, it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome Douglas to introduce our plan, A Sustainable Future Together.
Brian, thanks, and good afternoon, everybody. And can I just add my welcome to that of Brian's, to the launch of our future together. On Monday morning, I woke up to the news that dry, hot summers could become the norm in Scotland. This story was based on a report by researchers from Edinburgh and Oxford universities, together with staff from the Met Office. Researchers who'd looked at the impact of the summer of 2018 on Scotland, and then looking at the predictions for the climate into the future. And in their report, they suggest that there's a substantial increase in the likelihood of temperatures reaching 2018 levels between now and 2050. And the key conclusion that they came to was that the country should start planning now to deal with more frequent higher temperatures brought about as a result of climate change. And that indeed is what we are doing at Scottish Water and announcing today with the launch of our future together. We're planning now to safeguard and enhance our services to customers across Scotland against all the challenges of our changing climate, whether hotter, drier summers or more intense, frequent storms, and the reality too of our ageing infrastructure. But we're doing more than just planning for services here in Scotland. We're committing to playing our part in ensuring that we've got a planet that will be fit for future generations, by reducing our emissions to net zero and going beyond that thereafter. Now, over 150 years ago, the Victorians responded to a public health crisis by creating the basis of the modern water industry, supplying clean, fresh drinking water and creating sewage systems to transform sanitation. And their legacy lives on today in our water and sewage infrastructure. Like the Victorians, our response to the climate emergency will not only define our generation, but the quality of life for all future generations. Now, I think one of our most precious natural resources in Scotland is our water. But changes to our climate will increasingly affect the water cycle and our management of it to keep customers supplied at their taps. And our changing climate will impact also on the handling and treatment of wastewater before returning it safely to the natural environment. So serving our customers well depends on a healthy natural environment, but it also depends on effective physical infrastructure. Like any other physical assets in continual use, our infrastructure of treatment plants, storage reservoirs, pumping stations and pipes, it ages and declines and eventually needs to be replaced. And looking out over the next 25 years, that rate of asset replacement will need to increase significantly. Our role as the current custodians of our country's public water network has never been more critical. To safeguard the delivery of 1.4 billion litres of clean, fresh water a day to our customers, and treating their wastewater across the mainland and islands of Scotland. Not just for this year and next, but for the decades to come. Our response to the challenges of climate change and our ageing assets will underpin the future reliability and quality of our country's water and wastewater networks. But at the same time, we must continue to earn and build the trust of our customers, who rely upon us to care for the water on which we all depend. Indeed, our customers are at the very heart of our plan. We've consulted, engaged and listened to over 25,000 people in the development of it. The plan we're presenting here today reflects the issues which matter most to people and businesses across Scotland in connection with the water cycle. And throughout the process of developing this plan, the Independent Customer Forum has worked hard to ensure that this is the case. But our plan has benefited greatly from the stimulus and challenge, not just of the Customer Forum acting on behalf of customers, but also from the stimulus and challenge of our regulators and other key industry stakeholders. And I'd like to thank all of them for their part in co-creating our plan. This plan is much stronger because of the input of so many people and the breadth of perspective they brought to it. So thank you. Now, every day we strive to deliver excellent services and provide good value to our customers. So in that respect, our plan is building on positive foundations to do even more. Until now, and in common with many other regulated utilities, we've generally planned in 5 to 6 year regulatory cycles. Now our planning is all rooted in looking ahead to 25 years and beyond. And the most challenging new driver for us to address is our commitment to reduce our carbon emissions to net zero by 2040. Challenging because there are so many unknowns and uncertainties. We'll have difficult decisions to make about what we do and how we do it, without compromising the services on which our customers depend. But as with any challenge, there are opportunities. And the opportunity with this plan that we're launching today is to boldly transform what we do. Our plan sets out clearly how we will support a flourishing Scotland. And to achieve this, we've set 3 key areas of focus or ambition. Delivering service excellence in all that we do. Reducing our carbon footprint to net zero emissions and then going beyond that thereafter. And providing great value for our customers both now and in the future, while ensuring too that we remain a financially sustainable organisation. Now, these 3 ambitions are interconnected. They are not standalone elements. And many of the choices we'll make and the investments we'll deliver will be designed to maximise the achievement of all 3 ambitions. These ambitions build on our strong foundations, woven into the fabric of Scottish Water and the organisation we must become, underpinning the work of our people who'll deliver them and the services our customers will receive. So let me talk briefly in turn about each of them. Service excellence. There's a strong relationship between our customers and our country's water. It's their water and it flows through their lives daily. We know from speaking to people across Scotland that there's a sense of pride in the water that flows through their taps. And our ambition in the years and decades ahead will be to stay abreast of our customers' rising expectations and the challenges of our changing climate, to provide a consistently excellent water supply, to transform our wastewater services by the way we manage stormwater and convert our wastewater treatment works increasingly to recycling and recovery centres, and through the way we support a vibrant economy with investment in new infrastructure to support housing and business growth. Scottish Water has a record of success in reducing its carbon emissions and generating renewable energy. We've cut our emissions by over 40% and generate or host renewable energy generation of more than twice our own electricity usage. And clearly there's much more to do to achieve net zero. But we cannot simply eliminate all our emissions overnight. Producing more than 1 billion litres of water a day and recycling Scotland's wastewater requires power and chemicals to ensure that the water is safe to use. So we'll harness new technology, develop sustainable approaches, and work with our supply chain to lead the way in reducing our carbon footprint. We're developing a comprehensive route map which will take us to net zero by 2040 and then going beyond that thereafter. So ultimately, we have an overall positive impact on our planet. And that means developing bold new ways of working with our customers, our partners, and our stakeholders, but especially in delivering our capital investment programme. Now, it's crucial that our customers continue to get great value from their water and wastewater services. Our continual drive for efficiency has enabled us to reduce real customer prices by 10% over the past 10 years. Today, the average household in Scotland pays about £1 a day for the combined water and wastewater service. And that enables us to deliver over £650 million a year of investment in maintaining, replacing and upgrading our assets that deliver those services. But our assets are ageing, and over the next 25 years, that rate of asset replacement will need to increase significantly. And furthermore, our assets weren't designed to deal with our changing weather patterns. So over the coming years, we'll be investing more to ensure our assets can deal with the challenges of the future. Now, while that's likely to require moderate real price increases, we will continue to drive for innovation and efficiency to limit the impact on customers' bills. Now, in conclusion, the views of more than 25,000 of our diverse customer base have been listened to and have helped shape this plan. It's not something we developed in isolation. It's grounded in the reality of what matters most to the people in Scotland who turn on their taps. This is a plan which the public, businesses, developers, community representatives, visitors to Scotland and licence providers have all helped to shape. Almost 30 separate insight projects were completed alongside our sector partners to ensure the plan is absolutely grounded in the most current thinking about where the future lies. Our plan is rightly focused on what we will deliver for our customers and for wider society. But our plan will only be achieved by the enthusiastic commitment of all our people at Scottish Water and our supply chain partners. We'll need to change how we work. Many aspects of our activities will need to be fundamentally transformed. But embracing this future is a sure way to sustainable success. So I'd encourage everyone, whether those here today, watching online, or after this event, to read and become familiar with our plan. It'll guide our work over the course of the decades to come. Scottish Water alone cannot achieve what's required. But Scottish Water people, our customers, communities, our partners and our stakeholders can. Working collectively, we can realise the ambitions that we're setting out today. The plan will be a catalyst for bold new approaches which will transform how we deliver water and wastewater services to be fit for the next 25 years and beyond. It really is our future together. Thank you. So I'd now like to introduce and hand over to Peter Peacock, the Chair of the Customer Forum. Peter.
Thanks very much, Douglas, and it's a pleasure to be with you all. In what is today a really important milestone in the development of Scottish Water and the publication of the strategic plan, and in many ways it marks a resetting of what Scottish Water's approach is going to need to be over the next 25 years. There's a focus on current problems that we're aware of, but also a focus on major challenges that are coming down the track that we now collectively all understand. And it's partly, in fact significantly, about seeing Scottish Water as being more in future than just about its core services that it's delivered for many years now. Seeing a wider societal role for Scottish Water, a primary responsibility for delivering safe water to every household and business in Scotland, and taking the wastewater away and treating it and returning it to the environment safely. Maintaining assets to do that, and also responding and adapting to the climate change that's affecting the delivery of those services. But in a sense too, there's now an overriding responsibility to our planet's health, mitigating climate change, future climate change. And in future, Scottish Water's engineers are going to have to engineer for the planet's health every bit as much as our engineering to deliver the services that you've traditionally delivered. That's going to require to do things differently, essentially differently, and it's also going to require innovation like never before. Scottish Water contributing to a flourishing Scotland, helping to meet broader national outcomes, public benefits that the public are looking for from their services. Benefits in relation to the economy, in relation to better places to live, better well-being for our citizens, and in more empowered communities across Scotland. All being done from an organisation that's owned within the public sector. And that gives heightened expectations, I would suggest to you. Expectations of very high ethical standards. Expectations of real openness and transparency about everything that's done, about being efficient and innovating in the interests of the public and demonstrating value, but also providing reassurance constantly that Scottish Water is always doing the right thing by the people that it serves. Now, my job over the last 3 years has been to chair the Customer Forum for Water. The forum has been at the table of all the major discussions that have been going on, and there have been lots and lots of discussions going on, taking the customer's voice right to the heart of strategy planning and acting as a conduit for customers' views in that process and staying true to those customers' views as we understand and interpret them. And at those events that we've been at, we've been asking the questions that customers would be able to ask, were they present at the events that we've been privileged enough to attend. So we've probed, we've questioned, we've challenged, we've suggested, we've encouraged, and we've supported change by Scottish Water. And we've been advocating, we've been cooperating, we've been discussing, we've been negotiating the outcomes that customers want, as established by the research that's been undertaken by all of us. And a lot of research, as Douglas indicated, has been undertaken, almost or around 30 different studies, and using entirely different methods from those. From being able to answer surveys easily through a chatbot on your mobile phone, to traditional quantitative surveys that have been done, to qualitative interviews that have been done, to behavioural insights that we've been seeking through laboratory conditions and speaking to people, through in-depth deliberation with customers when we've taken people away for a full day and a further evening to talk about the issues that are in the strategic plan and understand how customers feel about those. And using Scottish Water's constant stream of data and intelligence they've got about what customers are feeding back to them about their services. If we've learned anything through that process, we've learned that there is no single bullet from research that gives you the defined answer to really quite complex questions. You have to triangulate on what the issues are from a variety of different perspectives. That research has been coordinated amongst all the partners through a research coordinating group, which I believe has been a success of this whole process, where all the key players are sitting around the table, prioritising research, planning research jointly, but also increasingly co-commissioning research between the partners to try and find the answers to questions or get perspectives on the questions that we're looking to research. And research is not just for a strategic review of charges or a strategic plan, it's an ongoing process, and I'm glad to say there's an annex to the strategic plan which covers all of the research that's been done that people can dig into at their leisure. Now, research has enabled the forum and others to get an understanding of customers' views. From that understanding, we've been able to advance various positions into the discussions. We've done so, for example, by setting out in a document what we thought the social contract was between Scottish Water and the people it serves. Kind of what's the deal? What do we get for our money as customers for the services that you provide? But we've also worked through a whole series of detailed position papers which we've submitted to the process of discussing the strategic plan. And it's those inputs that have allowed us to advance arguments across all the issues that I mentioned in my start of what I had to say. Expectations that come with public ownership, the standards of behaviour that are expected from a modern company in the public sector, the need to maintain service levels, a focus on efficiency and innovation, the contribution to wider public benefits, the contribution to a flourishing Scotland, and requirements above all to the obligations we owe to all the species on our planet to reduce emissions and to combat climate change. And that's perhaps the most satisfying element in many ways of watching this plan's development, to see that issue move centre stage, as Douglas has indicated and as I'm alluding to as well. Centre stage in all that needs to be thought about as we go forward. And the Customer Forum reckon that of all the things we put into the melting pot for discussion. We've got about 90% plus of what we are asking for in one form or another. You never get everything you want in life, but we've got as much as we think we're capable of getting at the moment. And as a result of that, I'm pleased to say that we've been able to formally endorse the strategic plan as having taken proper account of the views and the aspirations of customers both today and in the future. And today's launch is therefore an important milestone of not only the process we've been on, but on the start of a much longer journey. And those of us who have been immersed in that process, and I can assure you we have been immersed in this process for a long period of time, have had really privileged insights into what the future challenges actually are in some detail, begun to get a real understanding of that. The wider public out there really have got none of those insights that we who have been inside this process have been able to gain. Nor have they got insights necessarily of the real potential consequences for them as individuals from the plan. And we now need to engage seriously with the wider public in Scotland to explain what we've come to learn, to share that with them in a very open way. Now that is no easy task. It's going to be extremely difficult to do, but one of the things we welcome in the strategic plan is a commitment to tackle that. Now the Water Industry Commission will in due course touch on the questions of prices that Douglas mentioned and have to set the lowest reasonable overall cost for whatever services are to be delivered. And I don't envy them their responsibilities in that, but that's not an issue for today. That's for future times. I want to conclude by thanking members of the Customer Forum, some of whom are here today and others are watching online, for the considerable efforts that they've put into this process over the last couple of years. I want to thank Douglas and Simon and his team, but also Tom, who's here, and Molly, who couldn't be here today, but I hope is watching, for all the efforts they've been undertaking with us and with other stakeholders in really intensive discussions. But also to all the other staff of Scottish Water, some of whom I see in this room, who have put up with our probing and our challenge and our daft questions that we've been asking, but also listen to our ideas. We are lay people, and very often we do ask daft questions, but actually that's one of the really important parts of this process. It allows Scottish Water to think and reflect on how other people perceive the world that they occupy, but they are also important questions we've been asking, I think. So thank you for listening to us, but also I thank you for listening to me today. Thank you very much.
So we have some time now for some questions from the floor, and I have a list of a few folk who have said they would like to ask a question. So we'll dive straight in. Lynn Taggart first, if we can get a mic to Lynn. Lynn, fire away.
What does supporting a flourishing Scotland mean for Scottish Water?
Douglas?
What a great question. Well, this is something that developed in the whole process of creating the plan. This whole concept came up when, as Peter mentioned, we were thinking about the wider responsibility. We started developing the idea of an ambition around supporting flourishing Scotland, around some broader things we could do. And then we suddenly realised, actually, no, this is the very heart of our purpose as an organisation, is why we exist. And within that, the real core of it is actually what people across Scotland depend on every day, which is our responsibilities around the provision of this wonderful water and equal responsibility on the treatment of the wastewater. And that is the fundamental core of what it is for us to support a flourishing Scotland. But it then goes out from there. And I think the potential for us is how broad can and should that legitimately be, either in the way we go about our work to make sure we're maximising the positive contribution we make to individual lives or to communities, but equally going beyond that and starting to do things that we've never done before. So for example, in recent times, we started getting involved in putting top-up taps in places around the country. There's work we're doing in supporting swimming, because one of the saddest things I've found over the last few years is people who've died in reservoirs. So we're supporting swimming, but what else could we do to support life and health and well-being in Scotland? And I guess that's the encouragement to people across Scottish Water. Imagine what could we do that would be appropriate and fitting for us to do to support flourishing lives in our communities and our country.
Peter, do you maybe want to expand?
Yeah. Again, as Douglas said, this is one of the interesting things to watch in this whole process, has been how this idea of a wider role for Scottish Water, or that Scottish Water needs to be active in a wider role, was really quite peripheral at the beginning of these discussions, but again it's become really central. And I guess that viewed from where the forum was, the Scottish Water inevitably was concentrating on its core services of delivering clean water, improving the standards of that, taking the water away, treating it and returning it to the environment. But actually viewed from where we sat as a customer forum, and remember, our lives are not caught up every day in the water industry. We do all sorts of other things, and so we're bringing other perspectives. We saw a much wider role for Scottish Water. It was contributing, it was obvious to us, to the economy in a big way, and it needed to continue to do that and do that in ever more effective ways. We were conscious, and Scottish Water were conscious, and have certainly become more conscious, that our government has got a group of national priorities across a whole range of things, and they've got national outcomes that they're trying to achieve. We've got signed up to international agreements on sustainable development goals, which are about wider things than just delivering water and so on. So it's really about trying to think about how does Scottish Water contribute to all of that in terms of the economy, for example, but also how do you build better places for people to live? What's the role Scottish Water's got to have increasingly in blue-green city developments and the sense of building places that are worth living in and greening those city environments and making them more have more amenity and more strength for the community. What does Scottish Water contribute through its use of its land assets, which are considerable, to allowing people access? What does that do for a sense of well-being and so on? How do we actively encourage that rather than be frightened of doing that, but doing it under safe conditions? How does Scottish Water deal with other organisations to help them do this? I think one of the fears Scottish Water had, I think perfectly legitimately and understandably, was we can't do everything. We are essentially a water provider, but you don't have to do everything, but you can work in partnerships with others who can help contribute to that. So I think there's a whole role in that, and that can cover a whole range of things like access to land, but a whole pile of other things that Scottish Water can do. So I think it's in the spirit of seeing Scottish Water not just as delivering core services and the infrastructure to do that, but in contributing to this much wider sense of Scotland itself flourishing, and you can do that in a whole variety of ways.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question, Lynn. Next question is from Agnes Robson from the Customer Forum.
Thank you. You've set out the three sort of overarching strategic goals of service excellence, of beyond net zero, and great value financial sustainability. And I wondered how you saw those relative to one another. So I suppose my question is, how will Scottish Water kind of work to balance the competing demands of all three of these strategic aspirations?
Simon, do you want to go?
Thank you, Agnes. Yes, so as Douglas talked about, we've set out three really ambitious kind of outcomes we're looking to achieve around service excellence, about net zero, going beyond net zero emissions, but also providing great value and financial sustainability going forward. Now, each of those ambitions by themselves is really, really challenging to achieve one of those. What's really clear is the three together are really transformative. And it's actually an opportunity for us to transform how we do things. We'll only be able to do that by actually making decisions and thinking about things we do on a day-to-day basis or long-term decisions by considering all three of those ambitions. So the key for us is how do we make sure that we hold all three of those ambitions together equally going forward and not focus on one or the other.
Thank you both. Next question is from Ian Tate of the Water Industry Commission.
Thanks, Brian. In the strategic plan, the Scottish Water have sort of usefully set out the future challenges that it will face and talk about the transformation that needs to take place to deliver these challenges. What do you see as the key areas of transformation for Scottish Water?
Douglas?
Okay, thanks, Ian, for that one. I mean, I think when we think over a 25-year time period, particularly in the context of the way that Simon described that any one ambition on its own is tough, trying to achieve all three together will require transformative change. It's probably safer to say what won't need to be transformed, because I think over that time period, particularly in the context of getting to net zero and beyond, it's hard to think of many activities that we will just be doing as we're doing today or just by incremental improvement. So actually, the default what needs to be, why would it not all need to be transformed? Now clearly there are some areas where we've got existing assets in the ground that will continue to operate for decades ahead, where absolutely it'll be about operating and maintaining those as well as we can. But I think particularly where we've got any opportunities of new investment, we want to do that in a very transformative way. Wherever we are involved in activities and processes, we'll be looking as far as we can to simplify and streamline what we do, reduce the error and the cost of error in all aspects, take full advantage of whatever digital technology might bring. Today, we know with some sense of what digital opportunities lie ahead. By the time we're at 2030 or 2040, who knows what else digital might offer us? So I think the safest way to answer the question is, I think the default mode is we need to be looking at why would we not transform pretty much everything we're about over that time period.
Thank you both. Next question from Gail. Gail Walker of Citizens Advice Scotland.
Probably just leads on from Ian's questions. Scottish Water has recognised the need to transform how it operates. Could you please set out your thoughts on the role you think customers and communities have to support this?
So, Peter, you've already touched on this a bit. Maybe you could pick this one up.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about how Scotland has changed itself in a wider sense over the last 20 years that I've observed from various different things that I've done in life is a whole idea that people need to be more empowered in their lives, and people need to be, and that extends to people collectively at a community level, both in terms of their geography but also in terms of their interests. And you've had acts of parliament. I mean, there's a community empowerment act in Scotland which talks about how you empower communities and does it in particular ways. There's also things like the Land Reform Act that gives communities rights to buy land and to own land and so on. So there's a general trend in our society about greater engagement at both an individual level and at a community level. And Scottish Water has got to be part of that trend. And I think that's really that is really quite a challenge because if you come, I say this in the nicest possible terms, that if you come from an organisation that is essentially and has been traditionally an engineering organisation, engineering is quite scientific and there are mathematical answers to problems, and sometimes you wonder, so how can a community be involved in this? But actually, that isn't the right question, and nowadays you have to seek to engage people. So I think in an operational sense, there's lots of ways in which Scottish Water can engage with communities. It can inform them what they're doing. They can ask them about, once they've informed about, for example, the state of the water supply to their area. Does it need improvement? Does it not need improvement? When might it need improvement? What would that mean for the community? Where could we locate the improvement? How do we minimise impact on the place? What other benefits can we get when we're doing that? I think Scottish Water, and we've talked about this, and Scottish Water are committed to doing it and are piloting things now. How do you engage earlier in the process with communities about the physical infrastructure that will impact on them? And it is their water system. They've got a right to know that apart from anything else, but there's opportunities there for that. So there's all that kind of stuff. I think this bigger challenge in the short term about how do you engage the wider Scottish population on what are the challenges that are set out in the strategic plan, and there are clear consequences for people about that. That is an immensely difficult task, and I don't think there's a single way to do it. It's going to be multifaceted, and in fact we are in discussions with Scottish Water now about how that might manifest itself. We've had some discussions. There is a huge amount more to do. There'll be a big social media dimension to that. I'm sure there'll be some sort of traditional town hall meetings to help with that. I think there'll be deliberative exercises where you take groups of people away to explain what's happening and get views back. There'll be engagements where people are rather than where they are not, so going to shopping centres and setting up stalls and talking to folk and letting them know. There'll be good video productions. There'll be endless things to be done. I think it's going to require all of that. I think people have got a right to know what's coming down the track and to be helped to understand it. So I think there's all of that kind of stuff, but this is new territory and one can't expect instant results here. I think it's going to take a long time, and it's part of the culture change that is going to have to come as things move forward.
Brilliant, thank you. Simon, do you want to?
I mean, Peter's covered quite a large area there. Now, first of all, as we've built this plan and we've actually been kind of working over the last few years with the customer forum and wider customers, I think we've got a huge amount of insight about what's important to customers, their pride in what we do today and the role that we do, but also what annoys them about what we do today. So that in itself is hugely valuable, and that will continue on. It's also really important to think about what role do customers have? How can customers help us deliver the services of the future? From actually about the amount of water that they use. Are we using our water wisely, for example? All the way through to the things that they flush down the loo that we're trying to encourage us not to do. So there's areas like that where we no doubt can work closer with communities. What I'd like to pick up on from Peter though is actually around some of the big investments that we do. And we are really good at the moment when we're building something to tell customers, engaging customers about what we're doing. But the decision has already been made about what we're going to do. I think the real opportunity for us and some of the transformative parts of this is really engaging with customers much, much earlier about that. Customers know their environment, they know their local towns, they know their streets much better than we do. So how can we actually get that insight much earlier before we make any decision about what we do? So that's where some of the real transformative part will do. But I will just finish off. It'd be great if people also thought wisely about the water that they use.
Can I make one other point?
Absolutely.
Brian, that I meant to make that I didn't, was that a continuing research role in this is really important. I mean, I've been, this is the second sort of review process that I've been through with Scottish Water, and when I think back now to what kind of research we were doing 8-9 years ago, what we're doing today, even what we're doing in the latter half of this review process compared to the first half has really changed pretty dramatically, and I think there's now a much greater understanding between the partners around stakeholders around the industry about what is the good research, how do you do it, how do you commission it, what are the right questions to ask. And so I've seen a great maturing of that as the time has gone on that I've been involved. That can only continue, it seems to me, because customers' views and perceptions change about things, but also the environment in which we operate changes, and that puts different pressures on us. If anything is going to happen in the environmental challenges, the targets that are currently being asked to be met, and they're very challenging, are likely to get shorter, they're not going to get longer. There are all sorts of consequences from that, and you've got to constantly use research also as a tool to engage with people, I think.
Thank you. I'm going to skip one question because I think between your answers there we've probably just covered it as well as it can be covered. So we'll go on to our final question this afternoon. It's from Mark Hunter of Scottish Water. Mark, your question please.
Brian, my question is, will the strategic plan change how investment is delivered in the future?
Right, that's most definitely one for Simon.
Yes, the answer is a yes mark in that one. So, I mean, first of all, you'll have heard, as Douglas talked earlier, about some of the challenges that we all face about getting to and beyond net zero emission, whether it be about our electricity usage, whether it be about the chemicals we use, the cars and vans that we drive in there. There's no doubt to us the bigger challenge is around our capital programme. So we invest hundreds of millions of pounds every year maintaining and improving the services and the assets we have. Now, every time we do that, it involves carbon out there. So the bigger challenge, and one of the biggest challenges is we need to think about is how do we do that in a low carbon, no carbon way, which will think about the materials we use, the techniques we have, the decisions we make all the way along in whether or not we do something or not. And you'll heard earlier from Peter, for example, talking about blue-green cities. So how do we use natural solutions to solve some of these problems rather than some of our traditional engineering ways? So I think of all the areas we'll see, some of the, from the capital and how we deliver some of our investments, we'll see some huge changes, not just within Scottish Water, but in society as a whole.
Maybe if I can just add to that, then I think more broadly what we're doing is we're fundamentally changing the whole way in which investment priorities are set and we appraise in investment solutions. So there's some really robust new process being put in place around how we identify the needs that we should be meeting and then how we assess and appraise those and make sure we're coming up with solutions that, going back to Agnes's question earlier, really try and wrestle with those competing priorities at times between what we need to do from a service excellence relative to what we need to do from a carbon, relative to what we need to do from a value perspective. So big changes in the investment planning side, but we're also quite fundamentally changing our approaches to investment delivery too, all with a view to improving the streamlining and the efficiency with which we deliver on behalf of customers.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for your questions and to our panel for your answers. You maybe show your appreciation to the panel. Thank you. So that's I'm afraid all we've got time for today. I hope what you've heard today has given you some insight into Scottish Water's strategy for the future. As Douglas has already said, we do not in any way underestimate the size of the challenge ahead or the transformation that's required. But it's an exciting time and it's one that all of Scottish Water's people are up for. We also need the help of customers, communities, other stakeholders and more broadly other organisations as we seek to realise these ambitions. So thank you for joining us today, whether that's here in Steps or indeed online. And we look forward to speaking to you further about this in the weeks and months ahead. So thank you very much.